Let me just read out a little bit about Dr. Suhardi just to get to know him up close, right? So Associate Professor Landscape Architect Dr. Suhardi Maulan is the Dean at the Faculty of Design and Architecture, Universiti Putra, Malaysia. He lectures in courses related to the history and theory of landscape architecture, landscape planning, landscape construction, and quantitative data analysis. His research interests include people interaction with the built environment, environmental cognition, and environmental behavior to support sustainable development. Currently, he focuses on exploring the ambiguity of people preferences and visual parameters for urban scenery and how the preferences relate to brain functions, emotions, behaviors, and health. He is also now the president of the Institute of Landscape Architects Malaysia. So today, ladies and gentlemen, his paper entitled Helping the World in Achieving SDG, the Landscape Architect's Perspective. So he believed in the involvement of landscape architects in the human well-being. The president of ILAM will outline how this profession contributes in the achievement of SDGs and what SDGs are from the perspective of landscape architects. So this is as much important as what IFLA president had said just now. Continue, bear with us. Let's listen to the president of ILAM, Associate Professor, Landscape Architect, Dr. Suhardi Maulan. Over to you, Dr. Suhardi. Please welcome.
Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Atia, for becoming the MC for today, and very much flowering introduction about myself. And also, thank you very much for all who are going to listen to me today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good afternoon to all of you. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Q, National Landscape Department, for inviting me to present the paper for today, National Landscape Day for 2021. But before I forget, happy National Landscape Day to all Malaysians, especially the landscape architects and fellow colleagues from the other profession. It is a very much important day for all of us to remember and to look back and to see how can we contribute to the landscape development for our countries as well as for the world at large. So the topic given to me today actually is the helping the world in achieving SDG, the landscape architect perspective. I think from the beginnings, all the speakers have talked about the SDG and it shows how important it is for us today, at least until 2030, where the day or the years that the United Nations has set that the Sustainable Development Goal must be met. But anyway, we have, as landscape architects, who is the main players for the landscape development in the world, we have to ask ourselves, how can we help the world as well as our nation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. And this is what I'm trying to do, besides trying to understand the challenges that we might face in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. Next. Okay, this is our landscape, our beautiful landscape, all right? We can see in Kuala Lumpur, in Penang, all right, the skylines of the cities that we have, all right? And the natural environment that we may have or can have in our cities, all right? The wetlands, the rivers, okay? And then the attempt by our designers to blend the nature with the architecture in our development. But this is our landscape that we have today, and how we are actually cherish and appreciate this particular landscape. And I believe that all of us will miss the landscape if we just get rid of them when we try to develop our cities or our housing areas or our nation. Okay, so next. So, but this is the issue that somehow related to our landscape. When we developing our cities, our villages, our industrial areas, we always encounter with the issue of noise, increased water pollution. We have the problem of air pollution. We somehow, we are not managing the visual quality, in which we call it visual blight. And sometimes when we develop, we engage, or we are actually inviting natural disaster to become more intense, right, to our cities and our areas, right. Also, when we are developing our countries and developing the land, sometimes we have the issue about the social inequality, in which the development is not balanced between one place to another, and the social inequality will relate, or will lead to the economic disparity between between the group of people. So this is the issue that we have regarding the development, and somehow also related to our landscape development. People may say that when we develop our land not really nicely, the first thing that will be gone is our landscape, our view toward the landscape, and the effect will be disastrous. All right. So next. So the herd in 2014, even these 2014 ideas, but it's still relevant today. In the world in 2050, we're going to have this issue according to herd. We're going to have more people, more crowd. We're going to have more crowded environment. We're going to have more polluted environment. The situation will be hotter and drier. Yang berbahaya, Mayor of Suhardi just tell us that how dry and hot it is in Suhardi nowadays, in which they cannot carry out so many landscape work because of the weather. So this is something that somehow true and really happening in our cities and our neighborhood now. And we will be better connected, all right, as today. We still can have the conferences and seminar, even though we are maybe miles apart. All right, James Hatter, our distinguished president of FIFA in Australia. I'm in Serdang, yang berbahaya Mayor Suhardi in Suhardi, Pulau Pinang, and I see some faces in Sabah and Sarawak. So we are very well connected with each other. So this is the thing that happened. And I don't know what will happen in 2050s, all right? And we have more volatile weather, and price of goods is in the question marks, all right? If you can see, the weather is somehow unpredictable these days, okay? It's not in 1970s or 60s, in which we can predict our weather quite nicely. So I still remember during my childhood, during December, in December, we can predict that we can fly our kite in December for surely, because we're going to have a good wind. But nowadays, we cannot really predict that way, because we're not sure what will happen. We predict the wind, but instead the rain will come, or maybe the situation will be hot, all right? So it also looks into the economic situation. In general, we are going to be wealthier, but there will be income inequality. So this is something that we have to think about, right, in terms of the social economic dimension of our world in 2050s. And of course, because we have more people, we have a problem with the food security. So all these issues have come into the mind of our policymakers, politicians, professionals for so long, even though they have talking about sustainable development for years. All right, so that's why. Next. So we have to ask, because the environment actually is somehow related so much to our life, so much to our behavior, and so much to our economy, we have to ask, what is the impact if this problem is not being solved, if we're not looking at it carefully? So do we get what we want or should from our environment? Do we get the functional ecosystem service that we should, right? Should we able to get fresh water, good food, good habitat, all right? We can have a place for recreation and tourism. A place or environment that we can somehow relate ourselves with our spiritual, cultural identities, all right? Or can our environment sequester the carbon very well and store it, so we can have a good environment, all right? So can we have the good soils and everything? So this is the issue or the impact that we have if we not be very careful regarding the issue that which I just talked before, right? So we have to talk about how can we get a good functional ecosystem services. How can we get the maximum values and benefit from our environment or our landscape? Could we have a good biodiversity? And how can get a good economic return from our landscape and environment? How can our social environment be better? And how can our psychological state of mind be better in order for us to live peacefully and to live happily in the world today? So this is the big questions that that many people ask, not only the landscape architects, but also the sociologists, the psychologists, the architects, planners, and so forth. But we as a big fraternity of the professionals, we need to think together on how to solve this problem, these problems, and what is the best we can do, right, as a architect professionals to overcome this problem or to contribute to solve this particular problem, right, to ensure that our world is better developed, all right, can be developed sustainably, get the best ecosystem services from our environment or our landscape. Next. So when we talk, because the topic today I was given is about sustainability. So because I teach history, I always like to recall back how it started, all right? So basically the ideas of sustainability, the ideas of looking the future about development have been coined back in 1800 something, all right? Worried about the environment back then, even though during that particular time the population is much more lower than today, but people already start thinking about that in 18th centuries, all right? And but in terms of the political wise or policy wise, it's only start in 1987 when the ideas about sustainable development or the word sustainable development have been coined by this report, Our Common Futures by United Nations, right? In which there is a commission, there is a committee, all right, led by Gro Harlem Brundtland to look into the how can we sustain our futures, right? So Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the former Prime Minister of Norway and also the former Director General of World Health Organization, have coined in the ideas of sustainable development, in which she said that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Meaning that whatever we do today, actually we have to think about the futures and how actually our society will deal with it, right? So for the fellow landscape architects, planners and architects and policymakers in National Landscape Department, we have to bear in mind that whatever we do today, actually, okay, is going to have an impact, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe 20 years in the future. So we may not feel the effect, but our grandkids will feel the effect, right? So, but over the years, all right, in 1987, they coined the sustainable development, but 16, right, after so many protocol and convention, you may have heard about the Kyoto Protocol, Stockholm Agreement, on all this Rio Agreement. Okay, all these things actually is to monitor how actually sustainable development have been carried out all over the world. But in 2016, all right, United Nations have come up with these brilliant ideas about the Sustainable Development Goal. All right, this is a 15-year plan targeted to be met in 2030. All right, it's very comprehensive ideas, right? Very visionaries about meeting the sustainable development, right? And they are looking into the subset of sustainable in a very comprehensive way. If in 1987, people just talk sustainable development from 3 different perspectives, which is the economic, environment, and social. But in 2016, they are talking about breaking it down into 17. Okay, 17 goals that should be met, which is, as you can see, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequality, accessibility and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institution, as well as partnership for the goal. So this particular goal actually have been mapped toward 169 targets, and they have more than 200 indicators. So all these goals, target, indicators, carefully monitored by the United Nations to see where actually we will go in the where actually we will be in 2030 and how actually we will go after that. I believe that after 2030 there will be another target that will be set by the United Nations. All right. But anyway, we are in the sustainable development goal era. So we talk about that. So it's very holistic, it's very comprehensive ideas about developing the world together. As I said, is have 5 dimensions, talking about people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Right? It's universal, right? People all over the world, from North Pole until the South Pole, from the east to the west, that we can subscribe to these ideas. And it should be top down, but yet it is bottom up. So I think all of us here is very much familiar with the Local Agenda 21, which is the ideas of having the community participates in the development or have a say on how actually their community should be involved in managing the cities. So this is the scenario that we have. All right. So it's very comprehensive. Right. It's very holistic. All right. And it has been pushed forward by the United Nations, and every country who signed the treaty need to follow through how actually their country doing during these 15 years. All right, next slide. Okay, so beside this SDG, we also have this program, New Urban Agenda, on how to make sure our urban areas actually is livable, is sustainable, all right? Because cities as the important spaces in the world need to manage well, because this is where the concentration of urban or population will be there. And we can see that even Malaysia said that more than 70% of our population will be in the urban areas in 2050. So we have to really think about how actually the city will be developed in the future and how it's going to be. So that is why, beside the SDG goal, we have the specific document related to about the urban development called New Urban Agenda. All right. So, and it's elaborated further in Sustainable Development Goal number 11, is to make cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. All right. So all these things, the Sustainable Development Goal and New Urban Agenda, is very much dear to landscape architects. All right. But next, we hear about it disputing in many form, many seminar, many conference, and everything. But in terms of the at the Malaysian levels, actually how actually we monitor, right? Just let to everybody know, maybe you guys already know about it, but this is just to refresh our mind, right? So Malaysia actually participate in Sustainable Development Goal Voluntary National Review. All right, this is the report that have to come out every, I don't know how many years, but this is the latest one I got in 2017. Maybe they will have to review to come out the report every 3 years or something like that. But this is actually looking into how the national or the country actually going to do, all right, going to make sure that the SDG is going to be met. All right, they have a mapping, okay, the roadmap, all right, preparations and the status of the plan, all right, what is the current policies, the action plan, and how they align the sustainable development goal to the Malaysian development policies and Malaysian development plan, and how actually it tie back to the existing and future policies as well as the law. All right. So it is governed by the EPU, Economic Planning Unit of Prime Minister Department. And if you can see that there are 5 clusters, right, involved. EPU have been identified 5 clusters that they will monitor. which is including the inclusivity, well-being, human capital, environment, natural resources, and economic growth. And there are 17 working groups that working to monitor the successfulness of the SDG in Malaysia. Then in this first report, they are acknowledged that the issue about SDG is complex, it's cross-cutting many issues, all right? And there's growing demand for public participation and social trust. This is something that is very important for our social, politic environment as well. As Malaysians actually become more literate, the demand from the public and also the social and the community is going to be higher, all right? And also the issue about implementation and innovation, how to ensure that the SDG ideas, strategies, and everything can be implemented, okay, in very innovative way, not only at the federal level but also at the local levels. All right, and last, on how to monitor and evaluate all action strategies. All right, how to measure that, how to make sure that everything actually going as planned. Okay, all right. So how can we rectify if there is any issue happening? So all these things actually is monitored by the Economic Planning Unit, and I believe that Kementerian Ministry of Housing and Local Government, or KPKT in Malaysia, is also involved, is very much involved, I think, in this National Action Level Plan, because they are somehow very related to urban development, and well-being, okay, urban well-being. So they must be the main player for this report, okay. So so this is a national action plan, but the question is that next, how actually we as the landscape architect or landscape architecture as a philosophy actually relate ourselves to this SDG, because SDG actually Sustainable Development Goal or UN Urban Agenda, all right, or sustainable development is very macro levels thinking or policy, all right, and but how actually we are as a landscape architect can position ourselves to make sure that we can contribute to the SDG, all right. This is something that is quite challenging, and I think Director General of National Landscape Department as well as the IFLA President, Mr. James Hatter, have doing a good job in explaining what are the things that need to be considered or to be taken care of by the landscape architects on how actually they can involve in sustainable development goal, all right? At least understand on what actually we are doing, or what the landscape architect doing, is somehow contribute to the sustainable development goal. This is very much important. All right, we may not go and involve in the macro level or policy level discussion regarding SDG, but what matters is what we are doing at the local level. That is very much important, and it goes back to the National Landscape Department at the federal level, state government for the states, as well as at the PBT level. So the roles of the landscape and recreation departments or planning departments in local level is very much important to ensure that the landscape architects can play a very big role, or very much bigger role, to ensure that SDG can be achieved. All right, but before we go to that, we have to ask, what is landscape architecture? So according to ASLA, landscape architecture is actually involved in the planning, design, management, and nurturing of the built and natural environment. All right, and according to ILAM website, landscape architecture combines design with environment, art with science. Okay, combine design of the environment with art and science. It's about everything outside the front door, both urban and rural, at the interface between people and natural system. So it's very broad definition about landscape architecture. What is it? All right, and as you can see, it's not really just about planting the trees. This is the perception that we as landscape architect have to dispel, and I think landscape ILAM, Institute of Landscape Architect Malaysia, since their existence in 1981, has tried to dispel the ideas that landscape architecture is only about planting the trees. This is something that need to be fight and despair more again and again. All right. So, but based on the understanding, we have to understand what actually landscape architect do, right? According to ASLA, landscape architect work to improve human and environmental health in all communities. All right, they plan and design park, campuses, streetscape, trail, plaza, resident, and other projects that strengthen the community. And according to ILAM, landscape architects are broad thinkers, thinkers, right, who thrive on the big pictures. All right, they are playing an increasingly important role in addressing the great issue of our day regarding the climate change, sustainable communities, water, housing, and the prevention of hunger. So if you can see, related to the landscape architecture by ASLA and ILAM, as well as what landscape architect do, we are already in the mix of the sustainable development goal. All right, and I can agree more with Yang Berbahagia Mayor of Putra that landscape architect have a lot or have roles to play, okay, in to ensure that our cities, our villages, our beaches, our lakes, our natural system can be developed sustainably, right? Can be protected, can be conserved, and everything for the betterment of us and our future generation, right? So next, so this is the in the context of nation levels, this is the role of landscape architects, all right? As you can see, we plan and design our landscape with the knowledge of art, science, and technology in the quest for sustainability, for better quality of living. All right, we involve in nation context, we involve in environmental planning. Some of our landscape architects actually involved in preparing the environmental impact assessment statement or reports. So, many of our landscape architects actually involved together with the town planners or planners to develop the structure and local plan. All right, and also at the site level, right, to come up with the proposal for development order or kebenaran merancang, and the most common one actually we are doing the design works, right, for the building and landscape plan submission, and also we involve in post construction issue, all right, the maintenance, the operation, the arboriculturist works, like horticulturist work. Okay, we may not be the specialist in that field, but we have to know in order to make sure that all the things that we are proposed actually relate back to what actually the design or the planning has intended. All right. We also involved in the special and feasibility studies, looking into how the particular development can be developed to give more profit to the developers or to give advice to the government how can they particular space being developed, maintained, or what's or not. So, in overall, we have in Malaysian context, with the involvement of our landscape architects in all these levels of services, we are already in the mix, already in the situation where we are involved in everything. All right, we are involved with the developers, of course, and we are also involved with many ministry. Okay, not only the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, and I believe that our landscape architect also involved with the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Agriculture, and many more to help them to come up with the best proposal that they can have for the betterment of the countries and for the people. All right. So next. So the SDG and the landscape architecture. I just try to map these two things, all right? So if you look into this SDG, the 17 list, the most affected sustainable development goal items, actually these 6 items, which is clean water and sanitation, industry, innovation and infrastructures, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life on land, and partnership, all right? And how you can see how if you doing the matrix between these two, the roles of landscape architects. Actually, landscape architect work to improve human and environmental health in all communities, and landscape architecture involved in the planning, design, management, and nurturing of the built and natural environment. And if you can see that these 6 SDG and the role of landscape architects, as you can see on my right hand, actually this is very much related. I can say that landscape architects involved in all 17 SDG item, but these 6 are the most related item that the landscape architect involved. All right. So, but what is the nitty-gritty of it? How can we further explore how can landscape architect actually do their works? Next. Next. Okay. We are anticipating, we in ILAM, we are anticipating the situation. How can we think in the future? So, we are actually in ILAM, we are actually formulating the ideas of landscape architecture agenda or landscape LAA 2050. All right, this agenda was developed by our former president, Professor Dr. Osman Muhammad Tahir. But we have the vision that the landscape should be a basis for the well-being and should inspire living through innovative technology and sustainable values. And we can say that the sustainable values that we have is all the 17 SDG can be our sustainable values. All right. And the values that we hold, the landscape architect need to be a key players in planning and designing the built environment and take a more influential role to lead and inspire design solutions that will shape our future for better living environment for all. So if you can see that, this is what we want to be, and this is our vision. All right, and as you can see that some of the things that we said here to let landscape architect involved in the planning and designing the built environment, you can see more and more projects in Malaysia actually cannot go ahead without the input of landscape architects. Even though maybe some of the people think landscape architect may not have the role at all, but I think it's just the misconception. At the end of the day, you have to understand that you need a landscape architect. All right, because you can see that there are certain issues and problems that you cannot solve, but you need a landscape architect to solve it. All right, so this is what I think one of the speakers said before. The landscape architect as the thinkers, okay, the creative thinkers on how to solve, on how to bind all together to ensure that we can have the good environment. All right. So this is very important because we are looking into the how actually we can integrate the art and the science, all right, into our built environment, especially to our outdoor environment. Who's going to tackle the outdoor environment? This is the question, and I believe there is no profession that better to do it other than the landscape architect itself. All right. So this is the spirit or the philosophy that we have for the landscape architecture agenda 2050. Next. Okay, so you can see that this is our motto: the lead, aspire, alive. All right. We try to understand and how actually landscape architects should be the strategic focus areas for this agenda. Landscape architects should be visible. We should involve in the resource management. We need to have experience and need. We need to strive for the conducive living environment. We have to understand on how to give the security and safety environment. We have to understand how landscape actually can give economic return to the development, to the nation, and to people at large, and how actually we can enhance our human capital enhancement. And we should have the best practice, and we should involve in education and research, and we have to see how actually technology and system can play the roles. But if you can see, I never see, but I believe that we can map this 10 strategic focus area with the 17 sustainable development goal. Okay, to see how it can be further explored, it can further understand, so the landscape architect can further understand what they can do, okay, to ensure that the SDG can be met, okay, in the future. All right. So next. So by understanding the SDG, sustainable development, the SDG, the landscape architect roles, all right, what is landscape architecture, all right, and having the landscape architecture agenda 2050, we have to understand how can we transform landscape architecture practice. All right, what should we do as landscape architect? So this is my thought, this is my ideas on what we should do. So first of all, landscape architects should planning and design landscape beyond formal spaces. We need to look into greening beyond plants. All right. We need to understand the population and users. All right. We need to be more involved in the public-based projects. We have to understand the economy of landscape. We need to understand or provide enough expertise and system. We have to be ready to enhance our knowledge and always acquire new knowledge. All right. Next. So landscape beyond formal space. We should be able to think on how actually we can have the landscape in new territory, the new spaces. Can it be at the accidental spaces, natural areas, green strip, new spaces? All right. And one of the good example actually is the HLN project in New York. When they start to bring up the green space towards the abandoned railroad in the middle of the city of New York, suddenly people say, wow. All right. Suddenly we see that, wow, the green space can be up in the air, something that never be think about before. All right. So it is beyond the green facade. It is beyond the green architecture because it's talking about the new spaces. But how can we develop these new spaces? All right. We have so many abandoned spaces in Malaysia. We have so many no man's lands in Malaysia, in our cities. Nobody cares. Can we do something about it? All right. But what is the challenges that we're going to have when we talk about that? Somebody have to take the lead. And I believe that the landscape architect have to take the lead in order to come up with the new ideas on to come out the new spaces. All right. And these new spaces must talk about the not only about the enhancements of the ecology or environment, talking about meeting people needs, okay, but also need to understand the economic of that particular project. Right, next. Okay, next. Okay, greening beyond plants. All right, so we need to focus on function, values, and benefit. All right, we need to understand green infrastructure, biodiversity, environmental quality, the health, the recreation. We should not talk plant as a plant. We have to talk about their function, value, and benefit, and how actually the plants can somehow contribute to all these function and values in many ways. And the ideas about the function, values, and benefit of the plant must be more and more, right? New value and function and benefit must be explored more and more, so we can have more needs to have that particular plant. All right. So if before people looking at plant as an aesthetic values, and after that function, and next looking into the infrastructure function of the plants, now we have to ask next why. So when can we think about the plants as the tools for social cohesion? How can we do that? All right. So that is the question that need to be think about by the landscape architects. Next. So we have to understand the population and user. Maybe this is been understood already. All right. Because there's many research have been done in 1990s in particular about the needs of the social dimension of the landscape, but still we need to understand the people perception, their demands, their concern, their preference, their satisfaction, their attitude, in order to us to have the meaningful landscape. Landscape without meaning can be abandoned. All right, people we don't care about the landscape that don't have meaning. So that is the reason or the question that I posed in one of the seminar in Singapore. When they are crazy about the green facade, they're talking about the green roof, right? And everybody is just putting plants on the wall or on the roof. But the question is that, does the green have certain social and cultural value? Okay, and I believe it does. Because without the cultural and social values, understanding of social and cultural values of the plants, we can see plants have no meaning for us. For example, the plants, the yucca plant in the desert in United States might be meaningful for the Indians in the United States or the native people of Americans. But the yucca plant in Malaysia may have different meaning. So we landscape architect have to work within this particular meaning. All right, that's only about the plants, but we also need to understand how actually we actually want to use our open space, the green space, all right, the buffer zone, so people can understand the importance of these particular spaces. So it become meaningful and cannot be easily changed their use. All right, without the understanding the meaning so much, that is why we see that it's so easy to change our park to become the development. All right, we put aside the political scenario, but we see that without understanding the meaning of the green space, it's easy to sway the public opinion regarding the open space or the green space, because they see the landscape or the green space is something that useless. All right, they only realize that they are missing something once the green space or the open space or the tree event that matters gone. Then they start to make complaint. All right. So therefore, the public participation is a must. All right. The Bukit Kiara issue that have been the court case regarding the parks and everything is very much needed to be understood by the landscape architects. Landscape architect must be able to well-versed in the public participation process, because without understanding the public participation process, we are going to have the problem. Now they are talking about the public participation in the KM issue. But in the future, I believe that the public participation will be narrowed down toward the development of the park itself. Right? So this is something that architect have to think about. Next. All right. Having said about the public, so it's important for landscape architect to start to realize or to start involved in public-based project. All right, we have to understand that many times landscape is a public realm. All right, you can do many things about the landscape. All right, to the buildings or to the interiors, but people don't see that the space is belong to them. But the landscape actually is a public realm, because the landscape spaces actually is the public space. People concerned about the public space, all right? And everything that we do for that particular spaces actually have the effect to the public perception, right? So the question actually is how to increase public attachment to the landscape and adopt a landscape. The ideas by National Landscape Department, Rakan Taman, is very much good ideas, all right? So it should be carried forward, but with different strategies according to the time. Okay, we need to further understand the awareness campaign or the importance of landscape, get together, saving the landscape, and mental and landscape education. We have to work with NGOs and universities, all right? And one of the projects that might be important also nowadays and become more and more important actually is the community park. Community park is a public-based project. And I know there's a lot of frustration among the landscape practitioner on how to deal with the public regarding the public as a community park or community garden. But this is the scenario that we have to face. How can we increase the participation of the public in regards to the landscape maintenance, management, design, and planning? All right. So next. Okay. So next. As a landscape architect, we have to understand the economic landscape. We have to understand the economy of the landscape project. The economic values versus the profit. There are two things different. Landscape may bring economic value, but may not bring profit to the people. All right, it must be value for money. All right, must have political interest and will. And we need to understand the budget allocation, ringgit per acre. And when I heard yang berbahagia Mayor Osman Price said and how actually they quantify how much they spend per acres for a particular project, you see that how actually the people see actually landscape contribute in terms of the monetary values, all right? And the budget allocation must based on the type of landscape, try to understand the supply and demand of the landscape, function and benefits, and safety and security. All this trade-off between all these function and values with the economic sense must be understood by the landscape architect. Next. So we also need a landscape expertise, all right? we need dedicated expertise actually. We need a dedicated landscape architect, we need dedicated park managers, horticulturists, ecologists, arborists, and also we need big data analysts. All right. So in the future, we need landscape. I think in the future we go towards the industrialization of data and something like that. So we need a good big data analyst. We need a good management system and tool. The ideas of 4.0 industrial revolution and how actually we can manage the landscape automatically, all right, using the technology and internet-based management system. Okay, so next. Okay, but the most important thing actually is that while we have all these things, actually we have to understand that while we are managing the landscape, in order for us to meet the sustainable development goal, we have to enhance. We cannot escape the ideas of Industrial Revolution 4.0, but also we also have to embrace Society 5.0, in which Society 5.0 actually we're talking about the digital society. We're talking about automatic living system. We're talking about transient living. Okay, how actually the change of land use, the ecocentric attitude will change because of the digital society, digital environment. Okay, then because of the digital society, the new concept of landscape spaces might change. All right, I believe there will be the increased demands and needs for the public green space because people will confine into the very small space and they just go out to their public space and they want to enjoy it. Okay, the way we work will change, right? And how we are going to use this IR 4.0 to manage our landscape management for the betterment of the society. So the question is that how actually we are in this digital environment, all right, in the transient living environment, how the landscape should be designed and planned. All right, what is the best for them? All right, are we going back to the deep ecological mindset? All right, or are we going to the very pragmatic and very constructive landscape spaces, or are we going to use the futuristic landscape that everything, maybe the trees or the playground or this walkway is going to be automated? So this is something that we have to think about. All right, so to bring more value to the landscape in accordance to the current needs and current challenges. All right, so all these ideas, all this transformation is needed in order for the landscape architects or landscape architecture to move forward and embrace or help the nation, all right, to meet the sustainable development goal. I believe that sustainable development goal is not static. The idea actually is dynamic. It's changed over time, even though the big ideas is there, but the content is dynamic, is ever changing. And the landscape architect must be able to understand how actually the changes take place and how they should react to that particular changes. If we cannot change, then we have a problem. If landscape architect cannot think beyond what actually they normally do, then we have a problem. We're talking about new norm because of the pandemic COVID-19. But what is the new norm in regards to the SDG 2030? So this is the question for the landscape architects to think about. Okay, either you are in the public practice, either you are in the private practice, or either you are in the academic practice. All of these things need to be think about. All right. So therefore, next. So therefore, that is why we are thinking about the Landscape Vision 2050. Okay, we have National Landscape Policy 2020. I heard that the Jabatan Landskap Negara is going to come up with a new policy. And then we should have the Malaysian landscape roadmap about the policy, education, development, industry players, relation to the other economic and social sectors. And we want to discuss all these things in the World Landscape Architecture Summit 2020 and 2021. Our team is a future tense. Okay, we're going to make it in the digital environment in Penang and where people and technology integrate. And how can we look into this particular issue in very more deeper, more insightful, and in meaningful way. So, I hope that the discussion is not going to stop here. I think it's a great platform that has been provided by Jabatan Landskap Negara to us to start thinking about the future. all right, in relation to Sustainable Development Goal. But we have to seriously think about it. And I invite all of you to come to the World Landscape Architecture Summit in August 2020 to further discuss about the future landscape architecture, all right, and how actually we can lead for the future solution. Next. So to end my slide, I just to have the reminder to all of us, all right. According to William Shakespeare and Halprin is one of the great landscape architects based in the United States. All right, he said that man is the actors and the world. This is according to Shakespeare, but Lawrence Halprin said the landscape is the stage. All right, and because of that, because we are the Khalifa, the stewards of the land. We are the director, and the choice is in our hand. So we have to think and we have to act wisely because we are the landscape architect. With that remarks, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Associate Professor Landscape Architect, Dr. Suhardi Maulan. We share with you, we embrace the spirit and also the reminder, we take it with us and put it in our heart. And today we pledge that we are going to be a good landscape architects and we know that our roles is not just to make our world beautiful, but also to be a broad and creative thinkers and green doers for a better environment. So Dr. Suhardi, I just wish to inform you that you received lots and lots of questions on FB Live and also on our Zoom link, but I can only read about a few since we need to go to our next speaker. So the first one which I could say here is that, first thing first from Massimis FB Live, support the idea to give LA bigger role. Yes, this is what Dr. Suhardi has envisioned and we support that and let's walk the talk. Right now from Yum Saruji, FB Live, Dr. Suhardi. So she said not only us need the trees now, but local need to know widely about importance of trees. How we can ensure that people will get to know how big important the nature to people. So maybe we are talking about the importance of SDG, the roles of landscape architects among the professional. Now, this question is very pertinent when it talks about how locals can understand the responsibilities of landscape architects about envisioning a better living environment for them. Over to you, Dr. Suhardi. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atia, and thank you for the questions. I think the question is how the locals can understand what landscape architect do. Is that the question?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I think first we have to admit that the landscape architect is not a profession like the architect or engineer where people understand it thoroughly. But on that particular note as well, not many people understand what actually architect do and what actually engineer do. They just understand the surface. Close to the landscape architect, right? People may see the landscape architects at the surface value only, but the nitty-gritty, the detail of what landscape architect do may surprise them. But the question is how to make sure the public know. So the question is that, so that is, okay, I think we can say that we need to have seminar, we need to have campaign, we need to have a poster, we need to have more engagement with the public and so forth. But I think that is the common ideas that we can have. Okay, and I think this is what we do in ILAM. We have seminar, we have everywhere, whenever we have the program, we put our booth to educate the public. And I think the same goes to the National Landscape Department as well as PBT. We are respective landscape department. But the most important thing I can say is that we as a landscape architect, and I think majority of you here are landscape architects, we have to see ourselves as an ambassador, the landscape ambassador that can carry the name of landscape architects. So you should be proud of who you are, right? And tell the public whenever you have the point, whenever you have the chance, what is the landscape architect? Then we have to ask ourselves, do we play that roles now? Right? So I think that is my message now, beside the common or normal situation on how to promote the landscape architecture. But the question now is that, can we become the ambassador that can promote landscape architecture and landscape architects better to the public? All right. So if architect can say, I'm the architect, can we say ourselves, I'm the landscape architect, and we are proud of who we are? And I think, therefore, I landscape architects. I go back to you, Dr. Tia.
Thank you, Dr. Suhardi. And I'm here standing, say, I am a landscape architect too. So we have lots of roles, by the way, what Dr. Suhardi has mentioned, and also to bring locals and also community to be part of our efforts, because I believe this networking, holistic collaborations between all is the key to success, key to have a better living environment, Dr. Suhardi. Yeah? So Dr. Suhardi, may I suggest to you to reply to all the questions we have on FB Live and also on Zoom link, because they're all very, very exciting questions and we don't have much time to do it now together, because we have to allow for next speakers, because she's already on the waiting line. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you, Dr. Suhardi, thank you so much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, give a very big round of applause to the President of ILAM, Associate Professor Landscape Architect, Dr. Suhardi Maulan. Thank you so much. And of course, we are in the second half of basically our working period. It is after 2 o'clock, and hope to have a much more energetic afternoon with much more important notes from our speakers. And be with us, because we still have lots of things to discuss, and Hari Landskap Negara, or Malaysian National Landscape Day, is only celebrated officially once a year. So spend your day with us, especially today and tomorrow, and you wouldn't regret.